This is an R Media podcast. Marie Claire presents You're Gonna Want to Hear This.
I played the message, and it was a man, and he said, I'm trying to reach Belle. I'm sorry to tell you this, but your husband is having an affair with my wife. I think intimacy is a shifting landscape. You can feel it, and it can be true, and then it's still true for you, but it's not true for the other person. Try to paint yourself as the heroine and not as a rejected person. Believe in your best version of yourself.
Hello and welcome to You're Gonna Want to Hear This, the Marie Claire podcast where we sit down with women whose stories shift the conversation and sometimes shift something inside us too. I'm Georgie McCourt, editor of Marie Claire. At the beginning of this year, I made a resolution, and that was less scrolling, more reading. I can't say that I've stopped the scrolling, but I have loved making more time for books in my life. And one of the first books that I picked up was Strangers, the extraordinary new memoir by Belle Burden. Many of you may remember Belle's modern love essay in the New York Times in 2023. It was one of the most widely read columns of the year. And it was a raw account of what happened when, during the second week of COVID lockdown, she received a phone call from a stranger telling her that her husband was having an affair. Within 24 hours, the man that she had been married to for 20 years told her that he wanted a divorce, walked out of their house on Martha's Vineyard, and left. There was no warning, just a switch, as he put it, that had gone off. Strangers takes that moment, that fracture, and it expands it into something deeper and more unsettling. It's not just a story about infidelity. It's about the shock of realizing that the person you trusted the most in the world has become someone you no longer recognize. It's about being abandoned. It's about what happens when the life that you thought you were living turns out to be something else entirely. And yes, Belle writes candidly about privilege. She grew up in one of America's most storied families and about the safety net that wealth can provide. But what she makes very clear is that money may cushion logistics, but it does not cushion heartbreak. It does not answer the unanswerable question, and that is why. What struck me most about this memoir is not just the devastation, although that is rendered with breathtaking honesty. It's the excavation. Belle interrogates her own role in the marriage, the financial decisions she abdicated, the ambition she put aside, the way comfort and security can slowly obscure your own identity. And in the wreckage of divorce, she begins the painful work of rediscovering herself. There is something deeply resonant here for women. The expectation to keep things tidy, to protect reputations, to absorb betrayal quietly, to clean up emotional mess without ever speaking about it publicly. Ultimately, Belle refused to do that, and in writing this book, she makes the case that silence protects men and not women. This is a conversation about trust, about financial independence, about what we owe ourselves inside long marriages. It's about motherhood in crisis. It's about being stranded on an island, literally and metaphorically, in the middle of a pandemic with no one able to pick you up off the floor. This is a conversation about devastation, but it's also about writing your way back to yourself. Here's my conversation with Belle Burden. Belle, I want to start with that moment that you were on Martha's Vineyard, and it was those eerie early days of lockdown, which I've almost forgotten, but you were building fires with your family, you were cooking together, and you believed that you were safe inside your marriage. And then at 6 a.m, your husband told you that he wanted a divorce and he packed a bag and he got on a ferry to go to New York. There's so much to unpack there, but I'd love you to go back to what had happened the night before.
Sure. So as you said, it was a terrifying time in the world, but we felt very safe and secure at our house in Martha's Vineyard. My husband was chopping wood and building fires, and we were cooking, and it was actually really nice. And I believed I was very happily married. I was very much in love with my husband. We had not had any conflict. But I was mopping the floor after dinner, literally mopping the floor, and I got a call on my cell phone, and I did not recognize the number, so I let it go to voicemail. And then I played the message, and it was a man, and he said, I'm trying to reach Belle. I'm sorry to tell you this, but your husband is having an affair with my wife. And I was just completely shocked, undone. I had no idea. My husband was a man who went to bed at 9 p.m. He worked all the time. He did not present as someone who would have an affair. And I thought he would explain it. And that night he really tried to. He said it had not been going on for very long. It meant nothing. He loved me. He loved our family. And I didn't sleep, but I spent the night thinking, okay, we're going to have to work through this. We're going to have to do therapy on Zoom because we're in lockdown, and I'll have to figure out if I can get through this and stay married. But by morning, as you said, he walked into our bedroom fully dressed with a bag packed and looked completely different, completely icy, like a different person, and said that he thought he'd been happy, but he wasn't. He thought he wanted our life, but he didn't. And he walked out of the house, got in his Jeep, and left the island.
We're going to take a short break here. Coming up next, Belle takes us deeper into that first week. The shock, the isolation of being stranded on Martha's Vineyard during lockdown, and what it feels like when the person you trusted most becomes a stranger overnight. We're going to be right back. I've read your book, obviously, but I'm still speechless because I just can't imagine being married to someone for 20 years.
Yep.
And then them walking in and being someone completely unrecognizable. What consumed you most during this time? Because for me, I would immediately start thinking about the other woman. I'd start Googling, trying to find pictures of her. But obviously you were consumed with your kids as well and trying to stay normal and act normal for them. What consumed you most in those next few days?
Those next few days were really very dark. I spent a lot of time on the bathroom floor, which people talk about as sort of a trope, but it really is true. I think especially as mothers, it's the one place our kids can't find us. And there was something about the cold of that tile that made me feel like I wasn't going to fall through the earth. I had a lot of trouble getting up from there. I had a lot of trouble getting out of bed. It felt like I had weights on me. And I just kept sobbing. I kept calling him because I just wanted some understanding, some idea of why he had left, how he felt about this woman, what was wrong with me. I begged, and I would call him in places where the girls couldn't hear me, our daughters couldn't hear me, just sobbing and begging for something. And he was completely calm. I think in these circumstances, they are like a mile ahead of you. And you're just trying to catch up and trying to make sense of this unbelievable shock and heartache. I think the thing that consumed me most was just heartache. I was in love with this man. Like, I really loved him and I built my life around him. But yes, I was very consumed with who this woman was. I Googled her a lot. I Googled her husband. She looked very different from me. She was younger, but not too, she was 30, I think, and very accomplished and professional. And you think, what does she offer that I don't? And, you know, it's a really deep, dark crevice that you go into. And I never called. I texted him once, but I never contacted her husband again on a friend's advice. An older friend who said it will just lead to more misery. And I think that was actually great advice, because I think the more I went down that road, it was just going to be even more painful and very little to be gained from it.
I think that is such great advice, because I would want to get on the phone to the husband and ask him everything. But you're right, it does just lead to more misery.
It really would. And now I'm proud that I just had nothing to do with them. You know, they threw a bomb into my life and then I had nothing to do with them.
And in your book, Strangers, you write that he never told me, not once, that he was discontent in our marriage, unhappy with me, or struggling in our life together. And you write really fondly of your memories of your marriage, and it sounds like you had a really beautiful relationship. But then there was that moment, and he said a switch had flipped, and that's when he went into this cold, unrecognizable state. You essentially experienced what psychologists call wife abandonment syndrome. What have you since learned about this?
I have heard of that now because a couple of people wrote to me about that, using that terminology, or runaway husbands. And I don't know that much about it. I'm not a psychologist or a therapist. But what I've learned actually from so many women contacting me from around the world, that what happened to me is not uncommon. I thought I was one of the only people it had ever happened to, because it seems so strange to go from being fully involved to just this cold switch flipping, just transformation. But apparently men, I'm sure women too, but much less common, men do walk out with no warning, with no obligation felt to explain, and then exhibit a complete lack of empathy, compassion, concern for the person that they've left behind. And it is heartbreaking to hear these stories, but I do feel less alone, because I think knowing that it's a phenomenon that happens, it makes you feel like it's more survivable in a way, because it's much less personal.
Well, it's interesting because your book is being discussed very widely on online forums, and the book raises a question that is being discussed, and that's, do you think that you ever really know anyone, even if you're married for 20 years? What's your answer to that question?
And I think that's maybe the nerve that the book is hitting, because it seems both totally impossible for most people, and most people are, in stable marriages and don't have to worry about it. But it also seems kind of possible. Like you could wake up one day and the person sleeping next to you for all those years is someone completely different. I end up believing that I knew my husband very, very well for a long period of time. And then that changed, and I don't know when it changed. I don't know why I didn't see it. I think intimacy is a shifting landscape. You can feel it and it can be true, and then it's still true for you, but it's not true for the other person. And that those like two plates just shifted, and at a point where I didn't see it. And I think we can be very knowable to our partners, but I think maybe there's a piece of all of us that stays a little bit hidden, a little bit unknown, especially as we grow and change. And I think middle age is a time of real change for people, both positively and negatively.
It definitely is such a huge change. And often it can be when women decide, actually, this marriage isn't working.
Yes, absolutely.
With intimacy, you talk about how, he would stroke your cheek across the table, and like it does sound like there was a really beautiful level of intimacy in your relationship. Was that there until the end?
It felt like it was. I mean, even that affection that you described was there like even weeks before. And I think part of him still felt it. But he had this dividing line between before and after. And the after, I kept living in that narrative that he felt that way, that he must miss me the way I miss him, and must miss our family, and must be grieving this. But every time I encountered him, it was clear that he wasn't. He just was not feeling that way at all. And so I had to really kind of shake myself out of that fantasy and that narrative, not just of him coming back, but just of him feeling something about me. So I really do struggle with that. And it was really important to me in the book to recreate and reconstruct our love story and our years together as a family, and the the passion between us, and the affection between us, and the respect between us. Because when marriages end like this, all of that gets erased, and it really just becomes about this very cruel ending. But all of that other stuff I still believe was true and was really beautiful and important to me. And I wanted my kids to know about that period of time. I think what I worried about with the book was that it would feel unsatisfying to people, because I just don't have those answers. I wrestle with them, and I wrestle with what he felt at the very end. I wrestle with what he felt afterwards. And the best I can do is just think he felt those things strongly, and then something shifted. And when it shifted, he really stopped feeling that way.
Something that stayed with me, and I know it's something that really, really impacted you, was that he didn't want custody of the kids. I'm divorced, and we have 50-50, and that was just sort of an unspoken. We were going to do 50-50.
It's what I wanted. Yeah.
And you assume it, like the rejection of the marriage was one thing, but the rejection of the children that you'd raised together, like that pain, I imagine, is crippling. I don't think I could ever understand why someone would walk away from their children.
It really is very hard to understand. And it was very hard for them to understand, especially the 12-year-old who really wanted a bedroom at his apartment. And what I tried to do is to really acknowledge her reality and say, you know, Dad doesn't have pots and pans. He's not able to make a home for you. I don't know why, but that's really about him and not about you.
So you're the one coming in and having to fix it. Like you're the one explaining his behavior. So not only are you dealing with your grief, you're trying to make excuses for his behavior.
Yes. And I'm trying to make it less painful while being truthful. And then at the same time, really begging him, like, please, you're going to miss so much by not living with them, you know, especially as they become teenagers, because you really see them, you know, when they're making a smoothie in the kitchen or they're taking a shower in your bathroom or you're, you know, waiting for them at curfew. This is how you know people at that age. You know, this is the intimacies of it. And I was worried for him he was going to miss all of that. But he was very clear. He never wavered that he did not want any physical custody. And as you said, I'm a kid of divorce. I wanted 50-50. I delivered a 50-50 agreement and it came back black-lined with all of the time taken out except for dinner once a week. I believe he convinced himself that that was better for them, that they should not have to go back and forth. But I think he just, again, the before and after, he really felt like he was a great father. He had done it for, at that point, 17 years, and he did not want to do the day-to-day parenting that we do, which is cooking dinner and checking homework and applying to college and dealing with the emotional meltdown or the boyfriend breaking up with you or all those things. And he's really stuck to that. But I should say, this is not a situation of someone moving across the world and not being in touch with kids. He pays child support. He keeps in touch with them by text. He's sweet with them and kind with them, but it's more like a relative. It's not like that kind of day-to-day father kind of attention. And that's been hard because there is so much that comes up, you know, with 3 kids and that's been all on me. It's also a great privilege because I have them all the time. You know, I have them for every holiday and I get a lot of time with them, but I do feel sad for both them and for him that they have missed that time together.
How have you stayed calm? Because, and that's sort of something that I've learned in the process of getting divorced and co-parenting, all I can do is try and stay calm because yelling at someone or getting really angry or being hysterical, it just doesn't get you anywhere. And sometimes it's satisfying to the other person when you lose your shit and they just watch you. So staying calm has sort of been something that I've learned is what you need to do, but it's hard. Through all of this, him saying he doesn't want custody of his children, how have you stayed calm and not just lost your mind at him?
Well, I certainly have. So I present more calm now, but I certainly had my bad moments. But I learned during the divorce when things were very heated to gray rock. I'm sure have you heard this expression?
I haven't.
Gray rocking. It's essentially not to engage. So somebody says something that's inflammatory or that's upsetting to you, you just say, okay, or noted, got it. And you don't give energy to the conversation. And it really works because often they can be looking for some kind of conflict and this just shuts it down. And if you get in the habit of it, you really get in the habit of it. And that was very, very helpful to me. I also created boundaries for myself, which I write about in the book a little bit. You cannot come up to my apartment without, a phone call. I set up a system where I didn't read emails right away. Just so I could take a breath and not react and not send emails at midnight because that's never a good thing or just save a lot of drafts and don't send them. But it can be very, very hard. And I do think that it plays into something that they're looking for and maybe does not serve you. And in the book, people ask me why I am not more angry in the book. And I think for me, even though I had those moments, the dominant emotion has always been real heartbreak and not anger. And I'm not sure why that is. I'm also a lawyer and work on legal cases where I have to present someone's life story in a very clinical, objective way, yet persuasive way. So I think that played into my style of writing. And then I also thought, I think in some divorce memoirs, they can get very angry and vengeful, which are well-earned emotions. I don't begrudge anyone that, but I think you become an unreliable narrator when you are just stacking up details to build a case against someone. So in both the book and my life, I tried to just stay more even-tempered. Again, not always successfully.
Well, same here. This whole calm thing is a 2026 thing for me. So
yes, we're working on it. Yes.
But it's interesting about anger because you can't control how someone else acts. So you can be angry for their behavior, but that's how they feel. That's how they want to live their life. And being angry,
and
it doesn't help.
It doesn't help in the end. And it can be corrosive, I think, to your whole being. And for me, I really had to reach a point, maybe a year and a half in, where I just had to accept that this was the state of things. This was the life that he wanted. He was not going to change his mind. And I was going to have to just move forward, one, with no explanations, no engagement on the difficult things with the kids, and then also with, a very different financial picture than I expected. And kind of coming to terms with that and knowing what my reality was allowed me to kind of shift from being so focused on him, which was like trying to get blood from a stone, and really turn the spotlight to me. And part of that was was looking at myself and decisions I'd made over the 20 years in the marriage, not taking blame, which didn't feel fair, but really thinking about choices I made around finances, around career. And once I did that, I think it really unlocked me and allowed me to look forward and think about what my life was going to look like going forward and stop just looking at him.
Something that really hit me when I was reading your book is the moment that you told your children. And I think it hit me because I still remember the moment that my parents told me, but also when I was getting a divorce and there was no infidelity and it was my decision, but telling my children was what stopped me from wanting to get a divorce. So I kept in my head saying, just give it another year, just give it another couple of years. And originally it was wait till I'm 40. I'm 44 now. And then I was like, no, wait till I'm 50. So I was trying to, because I didn't want to have that moment with my children. And I thought it'll work because we know that it will traumatize the kids. And it was horrible.
Yes, it always is.
Your husband, originally he wanted you just to tell them. And then you said, please, I want you to be there. So he flew in on his boss's plane to tell them together. But I just couldn't get over how emotionally detached he sounded in the moment. I mean, I can't wrap my head around it. But tell me telling the kids what that was like.
It was so painful. And I also really dreaded it and put it off for a month on a therapist's advice, and which I think was a mistake because kids sense, the kids sense things.
They really, really, they know. I still remember the day that my dad stopped kissing my mum goodbye, and he was driving me to school, and we walked down to the car, and I looked at my dad and I said, are you and mum getting a divorce? And because he was in denial, he was like, no, don't, everything's fine. But children know. And I just knew.
No, they notice things that we just don't notice. It's really true. That's so touching. My older daughter had seen a text on my iPad. So she was like pretending she didn't know and cooking for me and trying to keep me alive, essentially. And then my younger one didn't know and then felt upset that it had happened and she wasn't aware. So he came up, we sat in our living room. I had my arms around our two daughters. We had told my son on a call earlier because he was staying with friends on Long Island. I wanted him to tell them, since it was his decision, and he said, I haven't been happy, we're getting a divorce. And my younger daughter thought that he was joking, and then saw my expression and just screamed and ran down the stairs. And my older daughter just sat there looking at her father, which is sort of their two personalities. And he turned to me and he said, can you make me a sandwich? I'm starving. And it was, he had just told our kids that he wanted a divorce and that he wasn't happy. And then he wants a sandwich. And if that really shows just total detachment from the...
Completely emotionally detached. No empathy.
It really was.
Zero empathy.
None for those girls. And I had one of those moments that we have as mothers thinking, okay, the world tells me that I need to be friendly, caretaking, get along with him, show her that we are going to be good partners even though we're divorcing.
And also act like you're fine.
Act like you're fine.
Don't worry, girls.
Everything's good.
Mom's fine. I'm just going to make a sandwich.
But the other part of my brain was like, you used to live here. Go make your own sandwich. Like, what are you talking about? But I ended up deciding to make the sandwich and tried to make the best sandwich I could ever make because I wanted him to leave thinking she is the most incredible woman who makes the best sandwiches.
I'm really going to miss these sandwiches.
And how could I leave this incredible woman? And of course, the sandwich represented more than just a sandwich. It was home and warmth and this life we had created together. But I don't think he saw it that way at all. I think he just was hungry and he ate the sandwich and didn't think about it at all. And he was only there for 90 minutes and then left. And he texted and said, that was a great visit. And I just thought that was one of the worst days of my life and my kids' lives and your life, but you don't realize that. And it was just this total disconnect where I think he thought if he said it was fine enough times that it would be fine. But of course, for us, it just wasn't. Like he walked out the door again to just emotional wreckage left behind.
There's zero empathy. Like this does not to me sound like normal social behavior.
It felt very strange. But again, I'm hearing this happens. It's a very strange thing. I'm sure women do it too, but it's hard to imagine a woman doing it like this for some reason. Like it's hard to picture.
Well, naturally, we're more nurturing and we're the kind of people who
empathetic.
go and make sandwiches
yes,
for our husbands who have just emotionally detached. Stay with us. After the break, we're going to shift from devastation to rebuilding. Belle also reflects on the financial lessons she's learned. Everyone should listen to this. The expectations placed on women to stay quiet. And also how writing this memoir became a way of reclaiming herself. More in a moment. I wanted to talk about finances because you talk very openly about how you feel that you didn't necessarily make some financial decisions that you should have made. What did you learn and what's your advice to women?
Well, I think from before the time we were married, I started making decisions that I try not to kick myself for because they were made because I love my husband and I trusted my husband. But we made a change to our prenup at my husband's request that ended up being very much to my detriment. And then during the course of the marriage, I stayed home with kids. I still had my law license. And I did what felt like very meaningful work for school boards and that kind of thing. But we really were very focused on his career and his success. And he was in finance. We were both lawyers, but he had moved from the law to finance. And he was so good at it and so capable that I really handed our financial life over to him. And I paid the bills and I signed our tax returns. But I didn't read the tax returns and I really lost sight of where our assets were, whose name was on them, and what would happen if our marriage ended. And I think for me, I met my husband 2 years after my father died, and I really he said to me, I'm going to take care of you now. And there was something that felt very romantic about that, very caretaking and wonderful. This man in a gray flannel suit going off to work every day, working for our well-being. And so I really fell into that. And then as time went by, I think I convinced myself that I couldn't understand it. Not only that he was better able to handle it, but that I couldn't understand it. And I'm a former corporate lawyer. Like, I did securities deals and very complicated debt provisions. Like, I can read a tax return, I can handle investments, but I really convinced myself of that. And he leaves, he files for divorce, he files for the enforcement of our prenup. And I had put all of my assets into purchasing our apartment and our home, and I put them in joint name because I thought that's what you did in a marriage. It's what my parents did. It's what my brother did. And he accumulated wealth over the course of 20 years in finance and kept it all in his name. And under the terms of our prenup, he was allowed to keep that because it was in his name only. And I was at risk of losing half of my properties, which would have required me to sell them to pay him. And I won't reveal what happens at the end of the book, but I really had to take responsibility for that. Like, I had to look at the choices that I made over those 20 years, my choice not to pay attention, my choice to be comfortable rather than causing any conflict by asking questions. And my husband did nothing illegal. He did everything by the book, but I really chose not to look. And I don't know if I'd pushed and insisted that he put his assets in joint name too, if he would have done it, or if that would have broken up the marriage earlier. But I could have been a lot better prepared for a divorce. I don't think I ever imagined we'd get divorced, but I think I am a cautionary tale, and I'm okay being a cautionary tale if it leads to my peers and younger women who are not yet married, if it leads to them saying, oh my goodness, we should have these conversations. Like, what are all our assets and what would happen if we got divorced? I know we're like very happy, but I need to take responsibility for this. And I hear people starting to have those conversations. A girls' school in New York, I heard, is creating a financial literacy class for the girls in the school, which I can't believe they don't have already, but I'm so thrilled by that. So, yes, I feel, a little bit naive, a little bit dumb for doing this, but, I really think it was my responsibility to do it. And once I started looking at it that way and not just him as a villain, I was able to kind of let go of it and not really live in the injustice of it. He had financial trauma as a child, and I think entered the marriage being very self-protective. And I have compassion for that.
And this is the thing, everyone has different money mindsets, but I think, and I didn't have the right financial conversations in my marriage either. I think you just spoke about wanting to avoid conflict. And I think there was so many questions when I was in that early stage before I got married that I was like, I don't want to ask that. I don't want to rock the boat, or I'll just do what he wants to do. But they're so important because money and finances, that's often what makes or breaks a marriage.
It's so important. And it's so important to our freedom and our ability to weather a divorce. And I think that part of why we do it, I talked about the romance wanting to be taken care of, but I think we also do it because it feels essential to the male self-esteem and the male ego to be in charge of these things and to have some secrecy around it. And I think in my dynamic, because I come from a family with inherited wealth and he did not, and he was insulted by having to sign a prenup, I really wanted to boost him up. So I just was like, I think, and I see other women do that. Like, it seems essential to the man that they be in charge of this, even if the woman is the breadwinner.
Isn't that interesting that he was insulted about signing a prenup and then how everything unfolded? Thank goodness there was something.
Yeah, he was insulted, and then I agreed to change it. But luckily, things worked out for me. It is not the life I thought I was going to have, but it's enough.
When you say it's not the life that you thought you were going to have, how would you describe that life now? Have you found peace in the life that you have now?
Yes, and not just peace. I feel like I am much more my true self. First of all, I stopped writing when I was 18, had always thought I was going to be a writer, and something about reaching this emotional rock bottom, I was able to start writing again. And now it looks like I'm going to be able to have a life both as a lawyer and a writer. And to me, that's just the most amazing thing. I feel like I'm more relaxed. I'm easier with my kids. I'm less like brittle, I think, and structured. And I really love being in charge of my life. I love being in charge of my finances. I love being in charge of what my home will look like. I'm open to having another relationship, but if I don't, I'm very happy to imagine myself as the matriarch of my family and welcoming grandchildren. And I really wanted the life that I had, and I loved so much about it. But now I would not trade it. I would not trade this for that, which is pretty amazing. I wouldn't have said that in the beginning.
No, but it is amazing. And I mean, I feel the same. There was a really beautiful book in your book when your daughter Carrie said to you, I miss us as a family. And you replied, me too, but we are good now too, don't you think? And it's so true. And now I kind of I've got 2 girls, and yes, the nuclear family is the goal that everyone wants, but I also love the little moments where it's just the 3 of us, and we do the things that we want to do, and I make that a really positive experience. And I'm grateful that I get this close time with them, and that I wouldn't change.
Totally. And here's a secret I don't think people think about, which is that I think kids feel a lot more comfortable in families where there's just one parent there. There's not kind of this stern couple watching over you. So you'll probably be the house where all the teenagers come, and not because you're allowing them to do bad things, but just because it's like it feels friendlier in some way. That's been my experience.
No, I agree. When you think about the future, I know you've seen your ex-husband over the years, and you write about in the book seeing him on the street. And how do you feel about, there will be occasions if your children decide to get married one day, there will be occasions where you will see him in the future. How do you feel about that?
I do see him occasionally. I saw him for graduations. We have another one in May, and we will see each other for weddings and birth of grandchildren, I'm sure. For a long time, it was really painful to see him because I believe I was still in love with him. And it really took time. And now when I see him, and I describe one moment like that in the book, I really see him as a totally separate person, someone who I honestly wish well, which some people may not buy because I wrote a book about it, but I really do wish him well. But I see him as someone I really don't know anymore. I have no idea what his life is like. And he also does not really know me anymore because I've grown so much. So it's almost like a long lost friend that you're not really in touch with anymore. It's very different. So I used to really worry about those moments, the graduation moments and seeing him. And now I don't worry as much. It's always a little bit awkward, but I think that's true for most divorced parents, or some divorced parents, I should say.
It is always a little bit awkward. But ultimately time heals everything. I know it's such a cliche, but it really does. You just have to go through all the crappy, shitty stuff.
Time really helps. It really helps. You don't think it possibly can, but it really does. It really is the main thing, I think, is time.
Which is frustrating because I'd love just to do a 1-hour online course and then be,
right, be ready, yes.
through any trauma but it's definitely not the way. Obviously, online has gone crazy about a bidding war over film rights to your memoir.
Oh, yes. Mm-hmm.
Can you comment on that?
Yes, there's not been a war per se. I've not sold at the option or the rights or anything like that. I will say there's been a lot of interest, and I think it was something I never imagined. I was so focused on the finish line of publishing this book. And as I said, I thought it was going to be pretty quiet book that was not going to take off. So this has all been a surprise, but yes, and it's apparently a great part for a middle-aged actress. So there are a lot of great middle-aged actresses out there, really great actresses, and they seem to be interested. I don't know how it'll pan out. There's no one attached to the project at this point, and I'm not sure I will sign on the dotted line. It's like another big step of exposure, and I have to talk to my kids about it and make all those decisions, but it's very flattering.
Now, Belle, just to finish, the name of this podcast is You're Going to Want to Hear This. So to women navigating heartbreak, what do you want them to hear?
I want them to hear that they're not alone, that no matter how specific the circumstances feel to them, there are other people who are with you, like really spiritually with you, having been through something similar. And to try not to feel the shame on top of the heartbreak, because for some reason, when your heart breaks, you carry that shame and it's not earned. And then the other thing I would say is that often when your life falls apart in a way that you just did not foresee or want, it can lead to really incredible things, like really beautiful things that you will not expect. So, and then as you said, like that just time is going to help you, and try to paint yourself as the heroine, as, you know, a really incredible heroine, and not as a rejected person. Believe in your best version of yourself, because that's the truth. So they may sound trite, but I really believe in all those things.
No, that's such beautiful advice. Belle, thank you so much. It's been such a wonderful conversation, and I just loved your book. I absolutely loved it. Belle, thank you so much for your honesty. What a conversation. I think what makes Belle's story so powerful isn't just the shock of what happened. It's the slow rebuild that followed. It was the decision to shift the spotlight from what she lost to who she became. Now, if you're listening today and you're in the middle of something that feels unmoored, a breakup, a betrayal, or a version of your life that suddenly looks unfamiliar, I really hope that this conversation reminded you that clarity can come later. Time does heal everything. Belle's memoir Strangers is out now, and it is raw and thoughtful and deeply brave. If this episode resonated, please share it with someone who might need it. And if you've been enjoying this podcast, rate and review us. It helps us grow this community and keep bringing you conversations like this. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you next week. This pod was recorded on Gadigal land. We pay our respects to their elders, both past and present.